else telling you their innermost secrets.
You just have to be discreet.
Oh, God, yeah.
Are you?
Am I what?
Discreet.
Yes, I'm discreet.
Me too.
Can I ask you something?
What?
Why don't you have a date tonight, a Saturday night?
I did have a date. I stood him up. That was the phone call I made. Does that make you feel good?
Doesn't make me feel bad.
So where's your wife?
Where's my wife? My wife is in the country with her parents visiting for the weekend.
And you're here with a strange girl being a naughty boy?
I don't think having dinner with anybody's a crime.
Not yet.
Welcome to Bay Area Psychology. Tonight we will address a sensitive issue, infidelity. In Private Lies, Frank Pittman defines infidelity as a breach of trust, a betrayal of a relationship, a breaking of an agreement, a sexual dishonesty within the marriage. He states that when clients ask him if a behavior counts as infidelity, he suggests that they ask their spouse for an opinion. Basically, in my experience, behavior that I keep a secret about often violates an agreement with someone, even if it's with myself. Culturally, we tend to either romanticize affairs or, a la Nathaniel Hawthorne, pin a scarlet A for adultery on those who violate monogamy. So much passion is ignited about even the suspicion of infidelity that when men and women are killed in jealous rages, we call it manslaughter or temporary insanity, not murder. In fact, anthropologist Suzanne Fraser, author of Varieties of Sexual Experience, found that of 48 societies on which she collected data, 26 gave the husband the option to kill an unfaithful wife. Despite an almost universal strength of feeling about affairs, they happen quite often. We will take a look at reasons people give for choosing infidelity, as well as patterns of infidelity that can wreak havoc in a relationship. Joining us tonight is Los Altos marriage and family counselor Helena Brun. I want to welcome you. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Mary. It's nice to be here.
Well, I imagine that in your extensive training through the Couples Institute and in your subsequent work with families and couples that you have probably seen situations where infidelity is presented on more than one occasion.
Yeah, that's unfortunately true. I would say about 50% of the couples that come have had infidelity occur in some way or another in their married lives. And of course it happens also in any other relationship. You don't have to be married to be betrayed by an affair or to have an affair, as we all know.
That's certainly true.
Yeah.
Now, do people come into your practice presenting infidelity, like, you know, we're here for counseling because my husband had an affair, or do you more often find that it surfaces during the course of therapy?
More often, people come in already both knowing about the affair.
Okay.
That's more common. Sometimes a person might come in having the suspicion that the partner has an affair, okay, and it usually presents for individual counseling, perhaps bringing in the husband or the wife also, but the suspicion, usually when I see couples, they already both know about the affair.
Okay.
And it's a matter of, frequently it's already stopped, in fact, and they're trying to figure out whether they want to stay together or they want to get a divorce.
Okay. Well, that's actually quite promising. I mean, one of the common beliefs about affairs is if one takes place, that automatically means that a relationship is over.
No, I would say that's not a good way to approach the whole idea of affairs, because there's so many different reasons for why people have affairs that to assume that one should leave a relationship because one has occurred is really, it's just not necessary in most cases, and you could really be making a wrong decision.
Okay, so in fact, I know that we've prepared some graphics about reasons that people frequently give for having affairs. This might be a good time to take a look at the first one.
Okay.
Let's see. Why do people say they choose infidelity? Monogamy is an unnatural state. We were designed for multiple sexual partners. Affairs don't hurt anyone and are nobody's business. If no one finds out, no one gets hurt. And finally, if he or she had an affair first. Have any of those ever come up in your work?
Yeah, the idea about the monogamy, in fact, books have been written about monogamy being a myth, and perhaps that is so. About 50% of marriages, according to the Kinsey's latest report, I believe it came out in 1990, Mary.
Yes.
They said about 40% of men and 30% of females at some point will have an affair in their marriage, and other books will report higher figures, up to 60 and 70%. So perhaps it's safe to say that about 50% of all marriages eventually there will be an affair. So is monogamy a myth? That may be. I think if there's an agreement between the people to be monogamous, then it's not so much, it's more about whether they have they've broken an agreement.
Okay.
Then maybe ultimately we can't determine whether people can stay monogamous through life.
Okay.
But we can certainly determine whether an agreement has been broken between the partners or not.
Which is, in our opening, I mentioned Frank Pittman's work, and that's very much his point, which is it's about an agreement that we have that we need to honor.
Right.
Okay?
That's right. And therein lies the betrayal. Sometimes people will talk about, well, having an affair, it's my body, it's my life, and I get to decide who I'm going to share it with. And while that is true, it's also true if you have an agreement with somebody that they need to be informed if you're going to do something that has fallout on their life.
Well, and the second of the arguments was, if nobody finds out, nobody gets hurt. In your experience, is it possible for people to conduct relationships outside of their marriage and it not impact their primary relationship?
No, I don't think it's possible. Sometimes the spouse or the partner does indeed not find out, but it certainly affects the relationship in terms of the level of deception, and there's no honest communication going on, and that will affect that relationship in many ways. So there's no such thing as having an affair and not having an effect your primary relationship, whether it's covert or overt, that it's being affected.
Okay. So the idea that as long as he or she doesn't find out, everything will be fine. What about the last of them, when we talked about the fact that, well, he had an affair first?
Right.
Do you ever see that where people act out in anger, sort of punish the other partner?
Right. That type of situation might come up where the affair is really designed to avoid intimacy. We frequently talk in relationships about how we all want intimate relationships. That's what people say. But in fact, our tolerance for intimacy is frequently not very high. So it's kind of like, what can we really stomach when it comes to actually deeply caring for another human being and having a very trusting and honest relationship? And frequently people have this wistful idea of, and this kind of picture of how they want this wonderful intimacy, but they really can't tolerate it. So having affairs is one way to dilute a relationship and to avoid intimacy.
And in fact, as you were saying that, it makes me wonder if not sometimes people have affairs, and I've heard people say this, to enable their primary relationship to continue.
Yeah, sometimes it can work like that, the kind of stabilizer.
Yeah. Just
like, for instance, work or alcohol or any other type. Children sometimes people think can stabilize their marriage. Okay. It's, in terms of the affair, it may work that way sometimes if both parties buy into a certain denial about the reality of the situation. Some people take the stance that it's okay for him or her to have affairs as long as I don't know about it. And maybe in some cases there may be what we call a kind of an empty or a dead marriage, and they really don't want to have sexual relations with each other, and there's a covert agreement to go elsewhere. One case that comes to mind in terms of where it's stabilized perhaps a marriage was an older couple where she had Alzheimer's and was in a hospital and did not know her husband, and the husband proceeded to have an affair with another woman, never did divorce his wife, but had this liaison going on the outside. stabilized it for the whole family, for his children and so forth. His wife was really unaware of who he was at that point.
Okay.
So yeah, it can have a very much a stabilizing effect on a marriage. In a sense, that doesn't mean people are happy.
Right.
That doesn't mean that there isn't that uneasy feeling and that kind of gnawing, something's going on here. Whether you keep yourself from actually knowing by asking, by confronting the person directly or not.
Okay, and we'll, we're going to talk a few more minutes. We'll have a break. At some point, I definitely want to get to this idea about confession and should we come forward and talk about that. Mm-hmm. In your life experience, is there a cultural difference about this? I mean, in other cultures, do they have a different attitude about affairs than we tend to here in America? Yeah,
I grew up in Scandinavia, and frankly, I don't see a big, huge difference between the way the Scandinavian way was around affair. Of course, I was 20 when I left, so I don't know how much I understood about this side of life at the time. But certainly it's well known that in parts of Europe, and perhaps in all of Europe, and I just left too early to figure it out, it is common to have affairs, and as long as it doesn't interfere with the family and with your home front, then that's accepted. Again, it's a stabilizing affair in a sense.
Okay. Is it accepted with both genders?
Generally, it would be more acceptable for the male.
I was wondering about that. Yeah. I was thinking about the research that...
There's still a double standard there.
Yeah.
However, in this area, in our Bay Area, I absolutely see just as many women having affairs as men. Okay. If anything, this last couple of years have been more women presenting with it. In my particular practice, that doesn't mean that that's so all over the Bay Area.
That's very interesting. Mm-hmm. Well, we have more options and more power here.
More options, more power, more opportunity, much more travel for women and so forth.
Okay, what we're going to do is take a quick break. Stay with us. When we return, we'll talk more about the role of confession. Should we confide in our spouse? Stay tuned.
What is it?
I know who did this.
You do? Who?
Remember the girl who came to the apartment? The one I met in the Japanese restaurant.
The one with the blonde hair. Scaring me. What is it? Do you have an affair with her?
Yes. So sorry. The last thing I ever wanted to do was to hurt you.